Ashley Parker had no way of knowing how the picnic with her husband would end. On that day, there was no sign of trouble. Everything seemed exactly as always. It was a Saturday, and taking some friends with them, Ashley and Simon went out of town to have a picnic by the river. They planned ahead and took everything they could need with them. They got some meat for the barbecue, fruit for snacks, and even some drinks. Since they didn't want to just sit around all day, Simon brought a volleyball and a couple of tennis rackets. And when the young people arrived at the location, their joy knew no bounds. "It's so beautiful here, honey. This is what heaven on earth looks like," Ashley whispered, hugging her husband. After setting up their tents, the young people started a fire and got ready to cook some food. When the women were busy with the barbecue and setting the table, the men decided to take a swim in the river, which looked very warm and inviting. Simon was having the time of his life. He even suggested holding a little competition among the friends to see who could swim to the middle of the river and back. Unfortunately, none of the campers realized how dangerous this endeavor could be. "Don't worry so much. I've done it many times before, and everything was fine," Simon hastened to assure his friends. Ashley was the only one who felt uneasy about their idea. The woman was always wary of her husband's childish behavior, and therefore, she always tried to curb his enthusiasm at least a little bit. But that day, Simon was unstoppable. Having plunged into the turbulent river, the man confidently swam to its middle. At first, the friends watched with interest as Simon seemed to easily overcome the distance. However, they quickly switched their attention to playing tennis, and the reckless swimmer was left swimming without supervision. Thus, none of the friends could say how long Simon had been alone in the river. But when Ashley approached the shore yet again, she couldn't find her husband anywhere. "Simon, where are you? Stop it, it's not funny anymore." The woman was shouting, getting more anxious by the second. Ashley was soon joined by the rest of the group, and now they were all looking for Simon. Only when they realized that Simon was actually missing did Ashley call the police and the rescuers. The rescue team put on diving suits and went into the river to search its bottom. Unfortunately, most of the rescuers didn't expect to find the man alive. The current is very strong in this place. The body could have been carried several hundreds of miles down the river, one of the search divers said sadly. "No, this can't be happening. Simon has always been an excellent swimmer. He just couldn't have drowned. No, I don't believe it. Do you hear me?" Ashley kept repeating with tears in her eyes. But no matter how hard she tried to prove her case to the rescuers, the reality turned out to be very different from what she had hoped for. Unfortunately, the search operation didn't yield any results, and Simon's body was never found. Most friends and acquaintances of the Parker family realized that the man was most likely dead, and only Ashley refused to believe it. Despite the fact that Simon's body was never officially found, his relatives held a funeral in which an empty coffin was buried in a grave. Of course, during all this time, Ashley continued to claim that her husband was alive. But for everyone else, Ashley's guesses and assumptions weren't much of an argument in favor of her theory. On top of that, after the tragic disappearance of her husband, the young widow found out that she was pregnant. Ashley didn't pay much attention to morning dizziness and nausea at first, attributing them to the stress she experienced. But then, when the alarming symptoms continued and even got worse, the woman went to go see a doctor. After the checkup, Ashley was ready for anything except for what the doctor actually told her. "Congratulations, Mrs. Parker, you're pregnant. Of course, you're only a couple of weeks into it. So, to decrease the chance of miscarriage and to make sure you can carry the baby to term, you should really take good care of your health and start your prenatal vitamins right away," the doctor said, closing the folder with the test results. "What do you mean, pregnant?" Ashley exclaimed, still in disbelief. But the doctor only shrugged his shoulders and smiled in response. It was only now that Ashley realized that by the time of that fateful riverside picnic, she was already pregnant. Tears welled up in the young woman's eyes, as she was getting very contradictory feelings on the matter. On the one hand, Ashley was very happy about her pregnancy, But on the other hand, she was very sad that her husband would never see his own child. Having returned home, Ashley went into her room and cried until late in the evening. She was devastated over the fact that Simon had passed away in the prime of his life and didn't even know that he was going to be a father. Ashley suffered from morning sickness and dizziness throughout her entire pregnancy, feeling worse in the mornings and a little better in the evenings. And when the unfortunate widow saw the results of the ultrasound, her surprise knew no bounds. "You're having twins, Mrs. Parker," the doctor who did the ultrasound announced in a rather casual tone. This came as yet another blow for the grieving Ashley. The fact was that she grew up in an orphanage, and there was simply no one that could help her with the twins. Simon's parents were also poor and lived in a small, dilapidated house located on the outskirts of the city. Nevertheless, Ashley was very happy that she was going to have 2 kiddos. But on the other hand, she understood perfectly well that without the help of her husband, it would be very difficult for her to raise them. Therefore, in order to save some money and improve her shaky financial situation, Ashley got a job as a maid in a roadside motel. Unfortunately, this job didn't exactly pay well, but it was still enough for the lonely widow to provide herself with the basics. Fortunately, the motel management was very understanding of the pregnant employee, as it became harder and harder for her to perform her duties. It was all because of her big belly, which kept growing by the second. If it were any other woman, she would have probably quit this job 1 month in, but Ashley had no choice. The determined young woman continued to work right up to the very birth, which started during one of her shifts at the motel. Thanks to Ashley's friendly and supportive coworkers, the motel manager managed to call the ambulance in time, and Ashley was taken to the hospital. Feeling safe in the experienced hands of the obstetricians, the woman breathed a sigh of relief and plunged into a painful whirlpool of prenatal contractions. Ashley woke up a few hours later when the on-call nurse showed her 2 beautiful babies, a boy and a girl. "Thank you, Lord," the exhausted mother whispered with tears in her eyes. Ashley named her babies Michael and Mary. Now that she had children, the unfortunate widow no longer felt so alone. Caring for the kiddos took a lot of effort and all of Ashley's time, thus distracting her from sad thoughts and depression. 3 years flew by. By this time, Michael and Mary had learned to walk and even talk a little. Their cheerful, infectious laughter had a healing effect on Ashley's tortured soul. Unfortunately, she still couldn't let her husband go, and thus wasn't ready to let a new man into her life. One day, while taking her kids out to the park, the woman noticed a strange homeless man begging for a couple of bucks to get a cup of coffee. For a moment then, the face of the homeless man seemed very familiar to Ashley. Despite the fact that the man was unshaven and dressed in old clothes, Ashley still managed to recognize the familiar features. "Mom, why are you looking at this man? Does he have nothing to eat?" Mary asked. She was a very inquisitive and intelligent child. Leaving her daughter's question unanswered, Ashley stepped closer and nearly passed out in surprise. The fact was that the homeless man looked exactly like her late husband, who disappeared 4 years ago. "Simon, is that really you?" the woman asked, stammering at every word. To Ashley's great surprise, the homeless man shook his head and, looking into her eyes, replied politely, "You must be mistaken, ma'am. Everyone calls me George, although I don't actually remember anything from my past, so I'm not sure if I could have known you at some point." Ashley's eyes filled with tears when she heard the man's words. She was 100% sure that the man standing in front of her was her missing husband, Simon Parker. Realizing that her husband had memory loss, Ashley convinced the man to go home with her. Of course, Simon was first very reluctant to accept her proposal. On their way to Ashley's house, he told her how he was found on the riverbank by a fisherman about 4 years ago. The elderly fisherman had recently lost his son in a car accident and rushed to help the man in trouble. The current had probably carried Simon to the rapids, where he must have hit his head, which could have caused the memory loss. Unable to remember his own name, the man lived in a shack on the riverbank for a long time, and everyone simply started calling him George. Despite the fact that Ashley tried to tell Simon about his past, that didn't help him remember anything. Moreover, Simon began to treat Ashley with obvious distrust. "Why did you bring me to your house, ma'am? I told you that I don't remember anything from my past," Simon asked in surprise, unable to even remember his own name. And when it seemed that there was no way out of the situation, Ashley showed her husband their wedding photo. Picking up the picture, Simon shuddered. Having seen himself in a beautiful suit, he covered his face with his hands and started crying. Now he remembered everything: the ill-fated picnic by the river, and the way his muscles cramped while he was swimming. Embracing his wife, Simon pressed his unshaven cheek against her and whispered, "Please forgive me for being such a fool. I swear on my life, I will never leave you and our children again." "I believe you, my dear, but now we'll have to stay away from all rivers and any other kinds of bodies of water, just in case," Ashley answered with a smile. At that moment, Mary and Michael ran into the room and saw their mother hugging a stranger and started shouting, "Bride and groom!" Ashley and Simon looked at each other in response, and without saying a word, started laughing together. Now they knew that they would never part again and would take care of each other until the end of their days.